Welcome to Unlocking Passion, Men Report. Yet today, everything is different. This is no ordinary episode but a special edition, because this time we are not hearing the story of a man who was cheated on or abandoned in Thailand, but rather today we hear the story of a woman who went through the same thing but stood on the other side of the abyss. A story that began like a dream and ended in a nightmare she never thought possible. Bärbel, 58 years old from Saxony, married for 32 years, a marriage that had survived everything until they dared to take the step of emigrating to Thailand together. What you are about to hear is not a report about money or fraud. It is the story of a woman who lost her husband while he was still sitting next to her. So stay tuned until the end, because there you will find out why her fate perhaps reveals more about love than any warning about the Thailand love trap. This is her story, read by me, so let's go. My name is Bärbel. I am 58 years old and I come from Saxony. At the moment I am sitting on a fold-out couch in my sister's guest room, a small empty room with a bed and an old radio alarm clock on the nightstand. And everything I have left fits into 2 suitcases. Sometimes I wake up in the morning hearing the coffee machine in the next room and ask myself how I ended up here. For just 2 years ago I had a house, a garden, and a husband with whom I thought I would grow old. I never believed that I would one day tell my story on a channel like this, but let's take it in order. I was young when I met my husband. That was in 1986. We were young and in love and built everything up gradually together. A small house, raised 2 daughters, a completely normal family life in Germany. For over 30 years, our life was work, family, and routine. No luxury, but we had solidarity. He worked shifts in the factory and I was always at home, a housewife and mother who kept everything running. I cooked, cleaned, raised Louisa and Annika, and he earned the money. That is how it always was, and that was fine for us. When he retired in early 2023 at 63, everything suddenly changed. For the first time in his life he had time. Too much time. Perhaps even years before Corona, he started talking about Thailand more and more often. He watched documentaries, read blogs, raved about the climate and the cheap cost of living. I thought it was just a pipe dream, a typical man's dream of emigrating. But after the pandemic, when the world breathed a sigh of relief in 2023, the idea suddenly became a plan. He said, "Bärbel, we could really do this. Sell the house, give the children their share now, and start over somewhere in Thailand. No worries, no cold, no routines." I was skeptical but tired of everyday life, so I thought, why not? After all these years, we have earned some peace. He took care of everything: the papers, the retirement visa, insurance, even the moving container, and I was impressed by how serious he was about it. I did not know that in that moment I was burying my old life with my eyes wide open. In the summer of 2023, we sold the house, and in October we boarded the plane to Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand, far away from the tourist hustle and bustle. In the beginning, everything was like a dream. Sun, friendly people, shopping at the markets, temple visits, and hiking in the mountains together. We lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. In the mornings the roosters crowed, and in the evenings the crickets chirped. I saw how he blossomed again. He was more relaxed and above all happier than in Germany, and I thought we had made it. The first few months were beautiful, but sometime in the spring of 2024 something changed. He started going out alone more often. Just watching football briefly with the guys was his constant excuse. Then he came home later, then not at all until morning. At first I was even happy for him. He had quickly found a social circle, a few German retirees who had lived there longer. They met for beer, exchanged tips, spoke about visas, the new life in Thailand, and football. He was a fervent Lokomotiv Leipzig fan, and back then regularly in the stadium, he really blossomed, laughed again, and I thought maybe this is good for him. I told myself to let him be. He needs freedom. We were suddenly together 24 hours a day without work, without structure. That can be exhausting. But with every month he became more of a stranger. He wore new perfume, bought new clothes, suddenly paid increased attention to his appearance again. He was physically there but mentally somewhere else. And while the cicadas sang outside, something began to die inside me, not loudly but very quietly. It was in July 2024, in the middle of the rainy season, when I first really realized that something was wrong. We were sitting at breakfast, and he suddenly grinned as he stared at the screen of his mobile phone. I asked what is so funny, a second of silence. Then he said a name that I will never forget, and that would undo over 30 years of marriage, Nana. I asked, "Who is that?" He laughed, a waitress from the bar, completely harmless, but my gut knew immediately that was not true. A few days later, when he was showering, I took his mobile phone, and there she was. Hearts, kisses. "I miss you. You are my darling." I put the phone back, sat on the bed, and stared at the wall for hours in a state of shock. Inside me, it was silent, too silent. I wanted to scream, confront him, know everything. But my voice simply failed me. Sometimes you feel that something is over even before you have the courage to say it out loud. I thought, no, not me, not after everything, not after 30 years. From August 2024, nothing was normal anymore. He went out regularly, and when I asked if I could come along, he said, "It's not for you. Too loud and only men, you would be bored." I gradually became a side issue. He laughed at his phone when messages came and texted secretly in the middle of the night when he thought I was fast asleep, until I couldn't take it anymore. One evening in late August, I followed him secretly. He went into a bar district, loud, colorful, garish, and I saw a young woman walking towards him, Nana. She jumped around his neck and kissed him on the open street. He grinned. She held his hand while they talked, and I stood there frozen. I said nothing. I went home, waited until he came back, and pretended nothing had happened. Not because I was afraid of confrontation in that moment, but because I wanted to know how far he would go. I did not know that this was only the beginning, and that one can fall even deeper, even when one is already on the ground. After I had seen the two together, a thought would not let me go. I knew what often happens in Thailand, that many foreigners support their Thai girlfriends, pay for apartments, pay off debts, finance entire families. I wanted to know if he was one of them, so one evening when he was out again, I sat down at the laptop and logged into online banking for the first time in years. And there it was, payments every week, 10,000 baht here, 30,000 there, sometimes 100,000 at once, always to the same name, Nana. I sat there for hours and stared at the screen. I felt hot and cold at the same time. I broke out in a sweat. When he came home late in the night, I put the printouts on the kitchen table. He looked at them, was silent for a moment, and then said, "I am only helping her a little bit. She wants to build something of her own. Get out of the bar." I did not answer. I simply stood up and went into the bedroom. He spent the night on the couch in the living room. The next morning, he pretended nothing had happened, but I knew every baht that disappeared was like a piece of trust dissolving into thin air. Then I knew he lives in another world. I was no longer his partner, only his memory and the mother of his children. In my final desperation, I asked him, "Do you love her?" He said, "I don't know, but with her, I feel alive again." And with me, I asked, Tired, he said. Those 4 letters destroyed everything. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hate him, but I could only cry quietly so he wouldn't hear it. I didn't want to give him the last trump card that evening. Nevertheless, I tried to win him back. New dress, makeup, planned a weekend trip. He laughed. "That is your stuff, Bärbel. That would be too boring for me." Then I realized I am fighting against a shadow. There is nothing left to win back here. I looked into his cold blue eyes and understood that I had long been alone and he had finally finished with me. But the worst was yet to come. September passed in silence. After the argument about the money, nothing was as before. We hardly spoke to each other, lived side by side like 2 strangers who happened to share the same apartment. He sat on his phone for hours, left the house early, came back late. Sometimes he smelled of cheap perfume, sometimes of beer. Often he was very drunk and aggressive. When I looked at him, he looked past me. I tried to act normal, cooking, shopping, the bare necessities, but the air between us was heavy like just before a thunderstorm. Then in October, I went to the mall alone, and there I saw them, hand in hand. He was carrying her bag, while she laughed loudly. He saw me and quickly turned back to her. That was the moment I stopped living inside. But my hands were tied. What should I do 9,000 kilometers away from home, and no income of my own? I was trapped and couldn't just get on the next plane, and he knew exactly that. A neighbor, another German who knew about my problems, later told me that Nana has long had a boyfriend of her own, a Thai man. He just collects the money. I searched for her online and actually found photos, comments, and proof that my husband was not the only lover in her life. That was my last hope to shake him awake one more time before it is too late. Hopefully I showed him the pictures. He only said, "You don't know her." That doesn't mean anything. It was like a slap in the face, and that would not have hurt me nearly as much. But it became increasingly obvious. I'm talking to an addict who was blind with love. And so it went on soberingly. Days without words, nights without closeness. He was there but long since absent. I thought that was the end, but it was only the beginning of nothingness. In November 2024, I woke up one morning and he was gone. Just like that, without a goodbye. No note, no word. I only saw an open, empty closet. I panicked and ran through the apartment like a headless chicken. I looked in the living room, in the kitchen, in the bathroom, on the balcony, but no trace of my husband. He had taken everything: his clothes, his jewelry, his wallet, even his used toothbrush. I knew immediately where he was. With her, of course. He moved to Nana's, or rented an apartment together with her. And with him disappeared almost everything we had built up over 3 decades. I sat down at the laptop, wanted to log into online banking, but the password had been changed. I tried everything, but access was blocked. The account was no longer mine. The life we had shared now belonged to him and her. I had no money left, not for rent, not even for food. I sat there between open suitcases and suddenly understood what it means to be truly alone. I tried to call him. He didn't pick up. I wrote him on WhatsApp. He didn't answer. A day later, he finally picked up. My voice trembled. I asked, "How am I supposed to survive here without you, without money?" He paused briefly, then said coolly, "Without thinking, you'll manage. You are a strong woman, Bärbel." Then he simply hung up. I stared at the phone, and in that moment I knew he was really gone. Not just physically, but forever. In the end, it was my sister in Germany who helped me. She sent me money via Western Union so that I could survive, so that I at least had a roof over my head in a country where I never really arrived. The weeks after the call were like a gray fog. I hardly ate anything, hardly left the apartment, and only went out to buy a little something at the market. The nights were the worst. Outside dogs barked, crickets chirped, and I lay awake on the couch hearing the air conditioning whir and asking myself how a person can disappear so suddenly, not only from the shared apartment but from a whole life. I knew that he was with her, that he believed her, that he perhaps seemed happy, but deep inside me I sensed that he would fall, sooner or later. In January 2025, barely 2 months after his disappearance, the telephone suddenly rang, his voice trembling, broken, hardly recognizable. "She is gone," he said. "Everything gone." I remained silent, let him talk. Then he continued, "Jewelry, wallet, money, took everything. Only a note with the words, 'You are too old. Thanks for everything. Bye.'" After these words, I simply hung up. I stood at the window, looked at the street, and felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, only inner emptiness. A few weeks later, on a humid February evening, there was a knock at my door. He stood there emaciated, face sunken, his gaze empty. He said, "I am sorry." I looked at him for a long time and answered calmly, "I cannot save this anymore, and I do not want to either." No anger, no tears, simply silence. The next morning I booked my return flight to Germany. In March 2025, I left Thailand with 2 suitcases, a bag full of documents, and a silence inside me that was louder than any word. I remember the flight, hours of darkness, no more tears, only thoughts. I looked out the window, saw the lights disappear beneath me, and knew I am returning, but not as the same woman. When I landed in Germany, the air smelled of rain and cold asphalt. I stood at the airport, saw families falling into each other's arms, and yet felt free. My sister picked me up later. She said nothing, just took me in her arms and didn't let go for a while. I moved into her guest room, a fold-out couch, white walls, an old radio alarm clock on the nightstand, exactly where my story had begun. I didn't tell my daughters anything for a long time. I didn't want to burden them, not so that they would be ashamed of their father or feel pity for me. Only when I was back in Germany did I tell them everything. They were sad and above all angry, but they understood and they held me, without questions, without accusations. A few weeks later, I looked for a family law attorney. She filed for divorce in my name at the family court. He was in Thailand. The court had the documents delivered to him, but he never reacted. The divorce proceeded in his absence. No argument, no objection, no word, only paper ending what was long over. A few months later, the decree came. A letter, a few pages that close a whole life. I sat at the kitchen table, read the lines, and breathed deeply for the first time in a long time. Since I have been back in Germany, we have no contact, no calls, no messages. He stayed there and I am here. I have been working as a temp in a flower shop for a few weeks. The smell of earth, of fresh tulips and roses reminds me that everything that wilts can also grow again. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and want to turn to him, but the bed is empty. Yet the pain does not stay so long anymore. It comes and goes. I laugh again. I breathe again. I am me again. I hate neither him nor her. She took what she wanted. He gave what he needed. But I got something back that no one can take from me anymore. Myself. Sometimes you have to lose everything to finally find yourself. That was the story of Bärbel, a woman who watched her husband slip into an illusion until nothing was left of him, but she did not give up on herself. She lost, yes, but she found herself again. Her story is not a warning, but a reminder of how strong humans can be when everything that was certain breaks. We wish you, dear Bärbel, all the best from our hearts for your new start in Germany, and thank you for sharing your emotional story with us. If you yourself have experienced something similar in Thailand, whether man or woman, then write to us. Perhaps your story is the next one we tell. That was Unlocking Passion. Men Report. If this story touched you, leave a like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for your support, and see you at the next true story.